Hey, and welcome to Leadershipisation, all things leadership. I was kind of getting into that music there and just thinking, oh, I like this. And then I realized, oh, you're going to have to start speaking in a minute. So here I am. I'm Beth Bergen. I'm a global leadership and communication coach, and I am here most Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which, because we have daylight saving time at the moment in parts of Australia, is 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Look, we're in that gap. We're in that kind of no man's land, in that gap between Christmas and New Year. And maybe we're not sure what day of the week it is. Maybe the jobs that we have to do at home are kind of stacking up because we're having a whale of a time relaxing. And maybe we can't decide whether we get in the pool or go to the beach because both of them are so inviting. It's that here in Australia, it's kind of that hazy summer days. One aspect, and this is what I want to present to you today, one really vital aspect of leadership intelligence is setting boundaries. So this is about forgetting about the hazy summer days and thinking, hey, maybe there's something I can learn from this setting boundaries. They're often talked about, and my experience has been that sometimes we didn't know that a boundary was needed or that we even had that boundary there until someone bashed into it. So, what are boundaries? What are boundaries and why do we actually need them? Well, boundaries kind of define appropriate behavior in our relationships, whether they be relationships at work or relationships at home. And the really interesting thing about boundaries is that they're different for every single person. So it depends on your culture, depends on your gender, your personality, but it also depends on the social context. So the boundaries that you might have in a professional business meeting would be completely different from the boundaries that you might have if you were in a noisy nightclub or watching your favorite team at a footy match with a whole bunch of your friends. Boundaries really define the expectation that we have of ourselves, but also of others. And they actually do set a limit or an edge that defines you as an individual. So a really good example of this is our personal space. Now, most of us in different cultures have a different kind of area around us that we're comfortable about people coming into. And you'll find that area, your own personal space, is quite different. The boundary that you have for that is quite different at home with your loved ones, or when you're spending time with friends and family. It's quite different than what it is in the workplace, and different again to what it is when you might be meeting a stranger. So you might be like, I'm a hugger, so I have to be really careful that I'm not pushing through other people's boundaries. I've got to look for those cues to make sure they're actually up for a hug. And it depends very much on that social context. So, do I hug strangers? Sometimes in some contexts, I have hugged strangers because I'm meeting them for the first time in person in a context where there is an implied intimacy in that context. You'll notice that in some cases, in some cultures, in some countries, it's not okay to have public displays of affection. In public spaces, people don't like to see people kissing each other. And you have to be aware of all of those kinds of things too with your boundaries. So there are those cultural boundaries that come over the top of it. One of the important things about setting boundaries is that it needs self-awareness. And this is you being clear about your expectations about yourself and how you're going to behave, but also about what you expect of others. And this comes down quite simply to what you're comfortable with, but also what you're not comfortable with. Now, I often say to people, it can be easier, and I don't very often want us to start with the negative. However, in order to set boundaries, it can often be easier to start with what I'm not comfortable with. When it gets to this point, I'm pulling back. And from there, you're able to identify, hey, I would be comfortable with this much. Here's my boundary here. It doesn't have to be the same as anybody else's. It's your boundary, it's individual, it's about you, not about anybody else. So following on from this, you've got to be, or you must be, assertive and clear in terms of sharing that boundary. And you're going to do that in an open and respectful way, not demanding. You're not going to say, get out, push back, don't get that close. In most situations, that isn't what you would say. You might respectfully say, I'd prefer if you would take a step back so you weren't quite so close to me, thank you. And then smile. You can see that difference. It's not demanding. It's not aggressive. You're not pushing them. So how do we share those boundaries? Well, I just gave you a great example. You're assertive, you're clear, and what you're doing is talking in a normal voice. Hey, I'd prefer if you'd step back a little and give me some space here, please. Thank you. Big smile. State your needs, state your request quite directly, focused on what you'd like. Now, it doesn't have to be I'd like. You can also say I'd prefer. So I've given you that great example. That's something that you can start to build on. Look, you need to actually decide what it is that you don't want to do. And once you've decided what you don't want to do, then you express those feelings quite responsibly to others. It's also about being prepared to decline the things that you don't want to do. So it's one thing to decide, it's quite another thing to decline that. No, thank you. Ask me again next week. Make sure that you're providing that honest feedback when you're given an opportunity so that you can set that boundary. Make it clear to people that you want them to address the issue with you. These are examples of boundaries. Hey, don't go ask some third party over there. Don't go gossiping about me over there. Come talk to me about it because I'm happy to work with you to resolve the situation. One of the big things with me is that it's really important that you represent yourself. So whenever you have an opportunity to represent yourself in positive and challenging situations, get in there and do it for yourself. That's your boundary. You don't want others to represent you. Make sure that you've got that clarity in those expectations. Now, let's have another look at some different types of boundaries, and this will give you some ideas about how you can start setting them. First one is emotional boundaries. This is where we offer our support of others. Now, you need to offer that support in a way that helps others feel supported, but that also means that you're not exhausting yourself. So this is all about you being prepared to say, I'd love to support you, not just right now, I've got too much on my plate. There's your boundary. If it gets to be too much. Another example would be a material boundary. And you will have heard this statement about don't lend money to people. If someone's asking you about lending money, you've got to have that boundary. For example, a boundary for me, I'm not going to give when my sons were university students, I'm not going to give them money. I'm going to actually pay for things that are their ongoing expenses, like their mobile phone or their internet bill. So think about what are those material boundaries. Third one is self-care. time spent with others versus time spent just with you. Make sure that you've got a boundary there and you're getting that balance happening in your life so that it's not always about you having to be with others when you would much prefer to be spending time by yourself. Another example is conversational topics. There are lots of topics that we might choose not to discuss, or conversations that we don't want to get into, or language that people are using that we don't particularly want to hear. Have those boundaries and be prepared to say, I haven't read anything about that, so I don't know and I can't contribute, or this isn't a topic that I'm particularly interested in discussing. Let's move on. Not loud, not rude, assertive, clear, and in a normal voice, yeah? Physical boundaries is an important one. Hugging, touching. I gave you an example about that earlier. Ask permission if you're concerned about it. Next one, time. How long are you going to spend on a particular task? How long are you going to spend with people? I can give you 30 minutes. Okay? After that, I've got other things that I need to do. Set that out clearly before you begin to spend time with them. And the other one, the final one here, is mental boundaries. This is your own thoughts, your own values, and your own opinions. Recognizing that these might be quite different from other people. Hey, I've got my own opinion about that. Thanks for sharing. I'm not cool to have that forced onto me. So that what you're quite clearly doing is setting that boundary. So in order to do this, it's about defining what those boundaries are. It's about communicating them. It's about stating it simply. Now, we'll talk about this more next week because I'm going to dig a bit deeper into some aspects of setting boundaries. But it's really about keep it simple, stay simple. No need to over-explain it. No need to justify it, because that's when you start feeling really bad. That's when you start feeling really bad. And then if you feel like you need to, talk about why it's important to you. You know, any boundaries that you're setting, try setting them at home to start with. Try setting them in your personal life and then transfer them into your work life. Now, really, they begin at an interview when you're asking questions and you're determining, do I fit this culture? Is this culture one? Is this role one that I can comfortably work in? It's about being upfront and professional, particularly at work. Manage the gossip about others. Let other people know that you don't want to be gossiping. I'm not interested in that. Move away. Don't take part in it. If you think it's going to upset people to tell them that, just move yourself away. Put headphones in. Let others know that you don't want to be disturbed. This is me doing deep and valuable and focused work. So please leave me alone for the next couple of hours. The other really interesting thing at work is that it's important for you to maintain some distance. It's not always helpful if at work, the people at work become your best buddies because the boundaries get blurred. What's okay at that footy match or at that nightclub isn't okay in a work-related meeting. Make sure that you can delegate work so that you can manage your workload. Get comfortable saying no. That's really important. Take time off and use technology to help to set those boundaries to keep people informed. So, if you're working on a project together, something like Trello is really awesome because everyone can go on there and see what's happening. Look, it's one thing to identify and set your boundaries. It's another thing to actually use them. And as I said before, sometimes we've set them, but we haven't really consciously or deliberately set them, and we don't realize they're there until someone bangs into them. And then you go, oh, no, get back over the other side of the boundary, please. So next week, what I'd like to do, or what I'm going to do, is talk a whole lot more about saying no and looking at ways that we can say no, but also what to do when someone is riding those boundaries or when someone actually violates those boundaries. What can you actually do so that you are coming across as professional, you're maintaining the relationship, you're regulating your own emotions, and really importantly, you're demonstrating your leadership intelligence. So, thank you so much for watching today. Hashtag replay if it's a replay. Questions and comments on the platform, and we'll get back to you. Reach out if there's something that you believe that I can help you with, either individually or with group coaching around leadership and communication. Now, my suggestion is that you start setting those boundaries now. It's a whole new year. What a positive way to start 2025 and to begin to make 2025 your year. Stay safe. See you in 2025. Bye now.